Imagine if all learning environments looked, sounded, and felt like this.
Zanaya, can you tell us about some of your experiences in the Innovation Center and our makerspace?
It's been really fun. You get to explore the things you want to do in building and stuff like that. And there's all these used tools that we are just using to make our projects.
And what are you currently working on for your independent project?
I'm working on something for stress because sometimes I get really stressed when I do my quizzes, tests, so I made this to make me feel a little comfortable.
But there's more. I told her what it means.
Good evening. What you just observed is a glimpse of my fourth grade math and science class in action. My name is Krystopowicz, and I just completed my 13th year of teaching, 12 of which have been in Southeast in Washington, D.C., where I was placed as a 2007 Teach for America Corps member. It's at my current school, Van Ness Elementary, where my principal, Cynthia Robertson Rivers, gave myself and a few other teachers the opportunity to travel the country to see some of the very best maker spaces and start to learn about maker-centered learning. We also were given the opportunity to pilot our very own maker spaces in the classroom. These experiences have transformed my teaching into a practice I call learning for making, and I'm so excited to share my learning with you. Welcome to Learning While Making. I dedicate tonight's presentation to the 9 students who helped me collect research. At any moment you walk into my classroom, you will most likely see students gathered together, engaged, working on either a project or a making experience. This hybrid of learning and making has become the foundation of my classroom. Learning while making is a method of teaching that I created. It empowers students to take on the role of a maker, where they build, create, design, and produce, while developing transferable skills that will improve learning across all disciplines. While I have observed remarkable results, such as student motivation, a desire for students to advocate for social issues, students really seeing the value in their work, I now want to measure if students' critical thinking skills are improving while they are learning while making. I have partnered with SetLab to assist in my research design so that I can properly share my findings with school and appropriate stakeholders. Van Ness Elementary School is in the heart of Navy Yard in Southeast DC. We recently reopened in 2015 with grades preschool through kindergarten and adding a subsequent grade each year. We serve a diverse student population of 315 students in preschools through grade 4th, and we'll be opening our 5th grade class, our final grade, this fall. We focus on social emotional learning and makerspace learning. I chose to focus my research on critical thinking because cultivating this invaluable skill is what will help students thrive in this demanding, complex, and ever-changing world. As schools strive to have their students proficient in 21st century learning skills, VNS is paving the way for how this could look at the school level. And critical thinking is one of our graduate aims. It is my hypothesis that learning while making will improve students' critical thinking skills. During my research study, I investigated how giving students the opportunity to create their own authentic self projects will foster two traits that are essential to critical thinking: reflective capacity and perseverance. Critical thinking is a reflective process that involves problem solving, creativity, and reasoning. My research has been driven through these three questions. One, what exactly does one do to be considered a critical thinker? Two, how can we organically embed critical thinking into the classroom? And three, how can we measure if students are critical thinkers? According to Wabi-Sabi Learning Center, they state that we can begin to assess critical thinking by breaking it down into basic components and then determining the criteria that we want to use with our learners. So here's a comprehensive list of 10 traits that they identify in a critical thinker. Critical thinking can be taught through a variety of ways. It can be explicitly taught in the classroom. It can be intertwined into the lessons and curriculum, and it also can be taught as a mixed approach. However, it's important to note that when a teacher does introduce critical thinking, that it is something the teacher needs to identify what it is, that it can be taught, and then select the best strategy to integrate it into the classroom environment. Most assessments that we see today are standardized and value critical thinking through these types of formats. However, tonight in my research presentation, you will see that I chose a different tool to measure critical thinking. To assist in students choosing a focus for their authentic self projects, I used Angela Duckworth's Grit book as a tool to help students get to an idea of what motivates them. So they thought about questions about what they care about, what matters most to them, how do I enjoy spending my time, what do I find mostly unbearable. Having these questions as a guide really enabled students to dig deep within themselves to figure out who they are, who is their authentic self, whether they thought about their race, their identity, their religion, their background. These thoughts helped guide them in the projects that they wanted to design. Students then began to cycle through the making stages, and while they cycled through the making stages, that's when I collected data on perseverance and reflective capacity. The making stages. I designed these making stages to reflect what you would typically see when you are going through writing stages. The stages that I've focused on to collect data are stage 4 and stage 6. Stage 4 is when students followed a protocol of giving feedback as well as receiving feedback on their work. And then stage 6, after they shared their presentations, they filled out a reflection form and I interviewed them where we thought about the impact that the making had on the student and how moving forward, this project and their authentic self projects can be balanced into their life. 9 students were selected through purposive sampling. We use class time in our Innovation Center, which is our makerspace. Our makerspace/Innovation Center is our sacred place where we store all of our materials. However, it is encouraged that the making happens holistically throughout the classroom. Students either use this time or they came in during lunch through the months of January through May to complete their authentic self projects. In order to measure perseverance, which is the idea that students aren't giving up when challenges arise, I used a scale that Angela Duckworth, her grit scale that she created, and I gave it to students pre and post their making projects. To measure reflective capacity, which is giving students the opportunity to really thinking about the process of their making and not just the end product, I used a rubric by Wabi-Sabi Learnings, and this helped me narrow down specific elements of critical thinking and using a conclusion rubric. And then I analyze the results. So before students began to make, they had to complete the grit scale. This is the grit scale that has been designed by Angela Duckworth, and students were asked to express themselves using a 1 through 5 on the following questions. Students had to think about their work ethic, their classroom performance, and their overall attitude towards challenging circumstances. Then students began to make. And when the final products were done, they worked extremely hard to cycle through all 6 stages. That's when I completed the analyzing and evaluating. Here are 2 examples of completed projects. On the left, you can see a website that was actually created by a student during COVID. This is her way to encourage her peers to express themselves using photography, art, and also helping the community. This particular student learned through her authentic self protocol that she really has a craft and talent of designing. So she created masks, and she wants to help those who weren't able to at the time buy a protective mask. And then on the right, you can see a net that was created by one of our students who loves animals, loves the environment. So for her, in her expressive way, she wanted to create a net to capture pollution that's filling our Anacostia River. Here are some of the data points that I used to measure reflective capacity from stage 4 and stage 6.
Can you clarify why you put a light in the middle of the sand?
I put a light in the middle of the sand because I thought it would be like a good what's the word I'm looking for? It would be a good touch to it. So I put a light. Why I used light. So
How have the making stages been beneficial to your making?
Well, they help me to make sure that I'm stable with my project and that I really want to do it, to make sure that I won't change my mind in the middle of what I'm doing.
And how has the peer feedback been helpful for you?
The peer feedback is helpful because I know what other people see and not just what I see.
So as you can see, I used the language from the students that came from their reflection sheets in stage 4 and then oral feedback in stage 6 of the making stages. Here are the overall results when I use the critical thinking rubric of reflective capacity. For example, in stage 6, as you saw in that last video, the student had to make a summary of final takeaways from the project. The student received a 4 if they offered a clear and concise summary evaluation of the process and that the reflection is considered deliberate and appropriate. Whereas in stage 4, this is when students had to think about the feedback that not only that they received from their peers, but also the type of language and words they used and really the intention behind what they were saying when giving peer feedback to their peers. And as you can see, the average for this section was lower. Giving peer feedback as adults is difficult. So for children, it does take time. We do build in a protocol that we use and students have sentence stems to refer to, but it takes time to get comfortable with each other. So just overall, I would expect this average to go up as students continue to use this protocol. All right, when looking at the grit scale, this is where my hypothesis of perseverance improving completely backfired. So as you can see from pre to post score, taking this assessment, every domain was actually less. In fact, 7 out of the 9 students' overall grit score was lower than their pre-assessment score. So the average for pre-assessment was 3.9, where the average for post is 3.5. And I can guess that this happened for a variety of reasons. I would say the first is that students might have scored themselves higher on the pre-assessment because I first asked them to just think about any circumstance really in school. Whereas when they took their post-assessment, they were thinking about their actual authentic self project that they just completed. And with that in mind, students might have felt more that the project was actually harder than other experiences that they have completed. And also, Angela Duckworth really doesn't recommend using this as a pre and post assessment. So I think seeing that this isn't the best way to measure gives an indication of why the scores are off. Secondly, these questions aren't the best measurement for a making experience. There are very broad questions. There are questions that actually don't reflect the specific making experience, such as my interests change from year to year. And then last, more time is needed. It takes a lot for perseverance, especially at the fourth grade level, to be a skill that is cultivated and grown within a student. So giving students maybe the entire year instead of 4 months to measure would be ideal. The F word. Challenges. COVID, of course, took a moment. We had to readjust, and we all came together as a group to say that, hey, we want to finish this together and we're going to do it online. And students were more than willing to even restart their projects. And as I just mentioned, the grit scale. While the grit scale is a great way to measure perseverance for making, there needs to be a better alignment. So that's why I created new questions that actually specifically are tailored to the making stages. So now students will take this scale in the beginning of the year and at the end of the year moving forward. For example, you'll see a question such as, I rarely ask for support while I'm making. This question specifically matches to stage 4, where students are going to have to ask for feedback during their making stages. So this will give them the opportunity to see how getting that feedback from each other is beneficial. Call to action for educators. It's important to recognize that hosting a makerspace in a classroom is not something that happens overnight. The level of implementation that you've seen tonight has taken me 3 years to get there. With this in mind, I'm beginning to develop the phases of learning while making to support teachers who are interested in this work. Phase 1 is the launch. This is when you think about your making vision. What do you envision happening in your classroom? This is also a great way to really think about inequalities, inequities that are occurring within our current state, and to enable our students to work with materials and resources that they might never get the chance to. This is also a great way to tie making into students understanding who they are, not only as individuals, but as active members of the community. Phase 2 is when you start to tie the curriculum directly into the making. This phase is when you use your units of study and tie it with a rigorous, well-planned making experience. And then phase 3 is what you witnessed tonight, where you pick a skill that you would like to measure and collect data and have something to show that this making is essential in the classroom. Call to action for leaders. I've been very fortunate in that I've gotten to observe my principal, Cynthia Robertson Rivers, budget and plan for teachers to be able to have maker spaces in the classroom. This is essential. It was also essential for me to see other classrooms. She sent us to other schools across the country. She plans for us to attend professional developments, whether it's through Bucks Institute or Harvard Project, agencies by design. So just keeping in mind that money does need to be set aside for these experiences. And then of course, time. Don't expect to walk into a classroom as a leader and see a beautiful scene of making happening every time. We all learn through our challenges and mistakes, and just giving teachers the time to explore is essential. And then call to action for policy leaders. Funding should be allocated for STEM programs in the elementary school settings. And really to take it to the next level, we need to encourage partnerships with corporations, universities, and nonprofits that will support teachers with design project learning experiences. We as elementary school teachers have a lot on our plates, and it would be so helpful to have materials and resources and work collaborative with our leading industry leaders who are really paving the way for STEM. And most important, greater emphasis is needed on critical thinking skills and developmental benchmark. We've created a learning environment that is driven by numbers that do not holistically measure the whole child. There needs to be an even balance between standardized testing and social emotional learning. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I would like to leave you with this image. These are the diverse faces of your future politicians, teachers, doctors, lawyers, performers, engineers. The compassion and empathy that they demonstrate is why I am hopeful for our future.